in general, just to kind of start by explaining a little bit about my background, I work at HomeWork Solutions. Franny would, I have been at some of the conferences if you've been there and met me in person. Um, and I've been in this industry almost 20 years, honestly, more so on the childcare side. I studied child development. So I jumped from the child development world over to the tax world a few years back and started working at HomeWork Solutions. And really, I jumped into it because I had questions. I had questions as a professional nanny who was trying to navigate some specific tax arrangements and not getting comprehensive answers from tax preparers and CPAs. And realizing as I was doing so, and I'd reach out to people in the industry, that other people also struggled with similar questions. And so there's a lot that many people don't know because taxes can be overwhelming, and it's so hard to not know where to look for answers. So this is a way to just start that conversation a little bit more and learn from each other and understand kind of what the IRS says right now, because things can change too. So if you know where things are now and you know how things change down the road when you hear things, you kind of just know a little bit more about the terminology and what to pay attention to, and maybe how best to structure your agency, and how you want to consider maybe growth. Maybe you're thinking about opening a new branch of your agency, or you're thinking about just changing your model, or maybe you have blended models of how you'd like to offer different services to families, and understanding, okay, am I stepping through this correctly? And nothing is perfect, right? But it doesn't mean we can't pivot and kind of think about the best way to do it to lower our risks and make sure that everything's what I kind of say pretty on paper for the IRS. I love alliteration. So like I just try to think that way. Think about ways to play with it, and I know taxes are not always a fun topic. I try to make them fun. But the more that we can like think about it as play again and kind of think about how it impacts business decisions, I think the more we're receptive to some of this information. Um, so I'm going to screen share here. Give me 1 second. Make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Let me know when you see it. Okay, I got some thumbs up.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So, someone is the employer. Is it you? I didn't want this to sound ominous, but it kind of does. So let's kind of say it more friendly, like, "Oh, is it you? Like, who's the employer? Is it you? Is it me? Is it the nanny? Like, who is the employer?" And that question is a good one to think about because honestly, like someone has to pay the taxes or the IRS does start asking questions, and this is their question. Like, wait a second, like who's the employer? Is it you? Who's responsible for making payments? So we'll just kind of start here and start with an agenda. We're going to talk about classification, the what, when, how, and why it matters. And really kind of dig into staffing agencies and the different models that we most commonly see. I'd love when we get to this point too, as we get to blended models, to hear what maybe other people are doing or what they've heard others are doing. Generally, obviously, we don't have to name names, but more just like, oh, I think I've heard of an agency that did it this way. And that way you can kind of ask questions or talk through it. And then like helpful suggestions for guiding families or your clients rather, right? How can the industry assist you? Payroll companies like HomeWork Solutions are here to assist along the way with expertise so that you have a resource in your back pocket. So we're going to talk about that too, so that you have kind of quick, easy answers for families on common questions when taxes are brought up, because everybody gets nervous with that tax question. And then we'll just kind of do like a conclusion with questions as well. So there's time at the end. Um, Now, I have our disclaimer at the bottom. This disclaimer about not intended as specific tax, legal, or accounting advice. We want to be clear that like we're a payroll company. So while I have an accounting background and I can give you a lot of advice and I'm pulling it from source resources like the IRS or the Department of Labor, those sort of things, what we want to emphasize is that if you have a specific tax issue or arrangement, you do need to talk to a CPA or a financial advisor or someone who can help you organize your business taxes. Because I know a lot, but what I know technically in the venue of Homework Solutions, I cannot advise on in the same way. And a lot of what I know, I've also learned from professionals, and there's a value in engaging CPA when you need to for your business taxes, especially if you are under an audit or trying to clean something up, okay? But we're going to make sure that you have the direction to the appropriate resource, even if we can't be the solution for you for a more specific annual business tax question. Okay. To kind of talk about the structure here, I do some QR codes in the event that you're on your phone and you have this in front of you and you want to scan. I also link whatever I'm doing in the QR code to that slide. And then I've provided those slides to Danny as a PDF so that you're able to still click in and see the added resource there when you review the information at a later date. Um, and I always say, like, when you're kind of stepping into this world and it feels like intimidating, it always feels a little bit better when we know what we're talking about with terminology. And so we're going to start with just talking about what classification is. And when we hear 1099 versus W-2, or we hear a tax question, and as an agency, maybe you go, well, I don't really know about the taxes for the caregiver. Like, that's for you to figure out. Like, it helps to just kind of talk about definitions at first. And so when we think about classification, which is one thing that we want to pay attention to, like you'll hear of misclassification lawsuits, or you'll hear of what am I classified as? Am I an employee or am I an independent contractor? And so when we think of 1099, and we hear 1099s given, that classification is independent contractor. So if a nanny is receiving a 1099 or a senior caregiver is receiving a 1099, that receiving of the document is the other person classifying them as an independent contractor. Or alternatively, it might mean that that person is an independent contractor, like a newborn care specialist, for example. Or maybe it's a home health nurse who has their own small business, but then kind of does matchmaking through agencies to find the families. They might be an independent contractor. They might say, look, I'm going to come, I'm going to work with these 5 families and run the show essentially, but I'm using the agency to match and find somebody. So it doesn't mean that you should not classify as an independent contractor, but it's more understanding that a 1099 is in effect a classification for independent contractor work. It's a form that is used for the worker to report earnings. Okay. Whereas a W-2 is a classification for employee. They're receiving the W-2 to then pay their taxes, and a W-2 tells the IRS when that person goes and files, I'm an employee, and on this W-2 you see my employer's information. They pay me as an employee. And so the question of like exempt versus non-exempt, you'll hear that too. I kind of have it split like left and right for that same reason. You have independent contractors are often exempt. And what that means from like a Department of Labor standpoint is they can be salaried. They can set a rate that maybe is like, hey, I'll come work for you to do this project and you just pay me $2,000. They set their price. They don't have to adhere to hourly reporting. Whereas a non-exempt W-2 employee does have to adhere to hourly standards, hourly recording. And when you have hourly recording, you often hear that in the caregiver space because caregivers and home workers are protected under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And so they are required to be paid in an hourly fashion. And there's ways to kind of make that fancy to feel like a salary, sometimes like guaranteed hours, but in general, they are expected to be listed as an hourly paid individual. And so classification is going to allow for the proper flow of taxes and documentation for tax season so that the taxes and the forms can be used correctly. I think I see Savannah, you have a hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I hear clearly. So if
Yes.
that's working inside of a home has to be a W-2 employee. Is that what you said?
That is part one of it. Yes, I'm going to say the next part of it too. But predominantly, if they are working within a home, in someone else's home, they should be classified as an employee. There are some smaller percentage and rarer occasions where you can do a 1099 independent contractor, and we'll kind of talk about that too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
have that right. Um, when to pay attention to this, and this is kind of playing into that, like how do we know? Like how do we know how to classify them? It's who is controlling the work. And in a home, when we think about caregiving and we think about children and we think about, the elderly and these care needs, someone is often dictating that work. For example, hey, the children need to be shuttled to school, they need picked up, and then these errands need run. Hey, this person needs medication and they need to go to their doctor's appointment, and can you do this? And someone is usually managing that on behalf of the family and saying they need you to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So the control of work. And then who is making the payments and how much really. So when you think about who's controlling the work and who is making the payments to the person, I put in orange here agency or family because sometimes an agency is controlling the work. They have maybe several people that they say, well, I know the Smith family needs, a caregiver for these hours. And sometimes, person one, caregiver one is free. Sometimes caregiver two is free. And I'm just going to fill the need and I'm going to send who I need to send. And that's fine. And you see that more in the senior care space or healthcare space, like you'll see a little bit more of we're just sending someone to go meet a need. And me, the agency owner, is going to then control who I'm sending, what they're doing. I'm communicating it. I'm talking to the family. The family's paying me and I'm paying the caregiver. And so the flow of money is something that is paid attention to in that. Whereas a family often is doing a lot of that dictating of the work in a matchmaking situation. They say, well, I want this caregiver. I don't want a backup person. I've met this person and I like this person. If they can't come, maybe I'll just figure something else out. I don't want someone else. And then that flow of money, are they then paying the caregiver directly and then paying agency fees separately? Or are they paying the agency still and the agency is paying the caregiver, but yet they're controlling the work? And the agency doesn't really know what the hours are and is like, oh no, I just matched them and they pay me a fee, but I matched them and I don't really make up their schedule. They make up their own schedule together. So it's a lot of nuance around communication, payments, and who is controlling the work essentially. This IRS publication is basically the rule book for household employment. So, not just nanny care, but any household domestic worker. And so it's linked here for people who really love to read IRS publications. It's there. But the gist of it is who's controlling the work. Domestic workers are protected under Fair Labor Standards Act as hourly employees, and that the family should be the employer on record in most cases if they control the work. And so you have kind of the difference here when you have an employee arrangement where you have, working for someone else. They're earning money by working additional hours, generally works for one employer part-time or full-time. You have all of these different detailed pieces that feel like, oh, this is someone who comes into the house, performs a job. I always say if you're a little unsure, it's sometimes easy to think of it in terms of trades. Like a painter can come in and do a job at a specific time that you agree upon, but they can also clock out when they want and go take a lunch and go for a walk and go to the store and then come back later. And in caregiving roles, you can't easily do that. You have a child or you have, a senior care person you're taking care of. And sometimes you have independent time, but in most situations that you're still being dictated to be available to a certain extent or to care for an individual in person. Um, and so when you think about independent contractors, you want to think they're in business for themselves. They often tell me what their fees are and give me a quote. They have a project they're completing, like a newborn care specialist might have a project that they're completing. and saying, okay, well, I'm here and I'm offering specialized care and I am an independent contractor and I do these several arrangements throughout the year, but a lot of newborn care specialists aren't. They'll also say, well, I'm not really running mine that way. I want a W-2 arrangement. And then this is kind of a little bit more definition on exempt versus non-exempt, because I know that verbiage can feel a little funny. Yeah, Savannah.
Okay, so let's say there's an agency or a company. Let's say there's a company that hires household help under a contract, and the individuals agree to the household. Sorry, I have a newborn.
Yeah.
Sorry. Agree to the household schedule and to-do list, but the company has okay, okay.
You're okay.
Company the company tracks the contractor's hours when they're at the client's house, and then the client pays the company, but the client also can provide a fill-in if the individual's not available, so they'll send somebody else, and the individual they're sending is picking what to do on the to-do list.
That sounds more like an agency is employing them,
Okay. Even if like so
based on what you're saying. Yeah.
got
But
it.
you can have agencies that employ and staff caregivers and send them out and send. I always think if you can send a replacement or it's open to sending a replacement, that's a good indicator that as an agency you employ that person. If you can
The company employing them would they be contractors with the company or would they be W-2?
They should be W-2 as part of classification. If
Okay.
you are controlling who is going to what household, and I say you, it might not be your agency, right? But like in that scenario, if I'm talking to an agency and I say, okay, if you are controlling who is going to go to that house, who is going to perform what work, even if the family has a list of what's needed and they're picking off of it, you're as an agency owner saying, I'm going to pay you to go to this place. You're going to, follow these specific rules. You're still controlling and guiding them. If they have a question, it's not that they can't ask um, the family, hey, can you clarify this? But if, let's say, the family starts to ask them to do something outside of the role they were expected to do, and that person says, well, I need to call the agency because I don't think I'm supposed to drive this person somewhere. That wasn't part of the agreement. And they call the agency to clarify. And the owner says, "Oh yeah, no, that's okay. If they want to add that to the list, you can do that." You're still like checking in with the agency. The agency is your employer. You're checking in with them. But to give them, as an agency, to give them a 1099 would still be a misclassification by the agency, if that makes sense, because you're controlling that work. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, does that make sense?
It does, but my confusion is where, let's say, for your example, you do hire a painter. They still have to fill out that right address and still have to follow between rules of what.
Mhm.
So how does a painter
So
and then someone that does laundry a W-2 employee?
right. So doing painting, for example, they're going to bring their own tools typically, right? Usually they're licensed and insured because they have to get up on ladders, for example. They're going in to say, I'm going to do this project. So let's say I'm a painter and I work for, a painting company, a bigger company in the city. And I'm being told I'm going to go to this house and I'm going to go do this. Usually I have to bring my own tools. I have to make sure that from the main part of the company, I'm being invoiced correctly to say, oh, yep, here's your invoice, or yep, you can go online and pay it. So when something happens, even if they say, okay, hey, by the way, can we also add this hallway in? Can we do this too? Can we add this other task? As a painter, I'm still turning around and saying, okay, let me see, because that does require more paint. It requires XYZ, and I need to check with my boss. And is there more invoicing cost to it? Whereas someone who's actually doing work in the home, like laundry, for example, it's not that they couldn't run through a company that is the company employing them, but if that family is saying, hey, I'm going to control this work more and I want to hire you and pay you directly and you answer to me for the task list, not to your agency employer, then the agency is the one dictating it versus the family. Like it's who is going to manage that work and then how is the money going to flow. So I could be a caregiver that could go to someone's house and do laundry. But if the agency is still paying me directly and telling me what to do and communicating a task list and making sure that I walk away with my money at the end of the day, then the agency is my employer. If the agency sends me there and the family says, okay, so great to meet you. I'd love to, that you're working with us for every Tuesday from now till the end of whenever. And this is what I'd like you to do. These are the lists. And then they pay you directly. The family should be classifying you as an employee of their household. So think about money flow, not just exact work performed, but money flow. And then when you think about the work performed, think about tools being brought in. A good way to kind of delineate whether it's housekeeping work or something else is like even thinking of like a chef, for example, coming in. They might contract in and bring food, but go by a list that what the family says. And that there's a little more nuance there, right? So there's some gray area for specific roles, usually around drivers, chefs, housekeepers, those sort of things. That is more money flow and who's verbally dictating or in written form dictating the work. In the caregiving space, 9 times out of 10, if not more, 99% of the time, it is like the family employing if they're paying directly and providing care, or it's the agency employing with a W-2 if they're dictating that care and assigning people to go different places.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
Can I piggyback on that question real
sure,
quick?
sure.
So based on what you just said, the tail end of it. Also, if the agency sends a caregiver out and the family then pays the caregiver, even if it's for one day, where is that classified?
So if the agency is sending someone out and it's just one day, they're probably not going to cause any kind of crossing of thresholds like tax thresholds if it's one day, unless they're paying them a lot of money. And so in theory, if the family's paying them directly, they don't have to provide a form and don't have to classify them if they're not crossing a certain dollar amount. And we'll talk about the dollar amounts actually next. But typically, if it's a 1 day backup, it doesn't mean that the caregiver doesn't have to report it as miscellaneous income and pay taxes on it, but it does mean that not necessarily does the agency or the family have to give a 1099 or a W-2. Like they're able to kind of all just scoot on their way and not worry about it. The caregiver still should report it as like earnings, right? They should say, "Oh, I had miscellaneous earnings of a certain amount from different sources, but nothing ever that crossed a threshold that was big enough to get a form, a tax form for it." So they should pay attention to what they're earning. For those like date nights, for example, or 1 day sittings for individuals, but you don't have to worry about it in the same way.
Can you remind us of what that threshold is?
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about it next, and I'm going to have it listed so you can jot it down because there's a couple different ones. Okay, so just briefly before that, we're just going to I'm putting this here. We don't have to dig into it too closely, but when you're classifying as a W-2 employee, there's overtime requirements if they're working over 40 hours a week. So these resources are here, and you're welcome to bookmark them if you're like, yeah, I do a lot of placements like that, and it's someone going and working overtime, but this will be in the PDF for you as well. The different state rules can vary, and so I just like to kind of give general information for it, and you're welcome to, dig into it more. If you have specific questions about the state you live in, feel free to book time with me. Like I'm going to have my contact info, and you can just set some time with me. But the whole idea is paying attention to overtime. And when there's overtime and around the clock care, there can be specific implications. And so when you have that as an agency, I encourage you to just, even if we just set up a 30-minute call to just powwow one-on-one and say, well, how do you run your agency? What are these common questions that you might have? Please don't hesitate to reach out to me and we can like dig into some specifics around this particular topic. Okay. Um, and then just a little bit that you might have heard of when it comes to um, that backup care and thresholds and other things. When you have classification, the how and why, in 2026, The larger one that people tend to pay attention to has to do with Social Security and Medicare. And it's $3,000 over the course of a year. So, like if I'm a family and you've been sending me a caregiver and I've been paying them directly, but it's just like part-time work here and there, it's backup care. And then all of a sudden I realized, man, I really like, Jane. She's always coming, and then she gets along with the kids so well, and I really want to keep asking her to come along. Or, I have an elderly parent and this person's coming and taking care of that parent. And they're getting along really well. And it's just been light housework and helping and companion care. But maybe I want them to come more frequently. If I'm starting to cross that 3,000 line, that big one, I'm now going, ooh, okay, I want to start being more formal here. I want to pay attention to this a little more closely because clearly at this point, I'm starting to employ them more on a part-time basis. It might take them a while to get to that 3,000. The states have other things that they like to consider for state unemployment purposes. And usually in most states, that's 1,000. So it's a little less, it's 1,000 in a calendar quarter, though. So January to March, April to June, July to September, October to December. So in a calendar quarter, did I cross $1,000 to this person? And you might, but you'd have to be employing someone pretty consistently to do so. Like, even if it's someone that is going, look, we need someone to come, a caregiver to come once a week for a couple hours. We pay them $100, maybe 150. You're going to cross that line. But if it's someone that you're like, well, once a month they come, we pay them, 200 when they come for these specific hours and they hang out and they have companion care or they, hang out with the kids and we do a date night or whatever it might be. Um, you're not crossing that 1,000 threshold, which is why a lot of families really just focus on the FICA threshold more than anything, because that's when they're like more likely to cross for limited backup care, right? And that's to one individual. So if I'm a family and I have Jane come one Friday, Susie come another Friday, Shonda come a different Friday, like it has to be individual to the employees, like one to one, like paying you, me paying person two, me paying person three. So paying attention to not like the 3,000 collectively, but to each individual. And so when the first one starts to cross, that's when you want to go, ooh, okay, maybe I need to be paying attention to how I'm structuring my caregiving needs. And I say maybe I need to pay attention as in if I'm the family doing that, as a agency, you might have backup care and you pay them and they're maybe an employee of your agency. And if they are, you're already kind of factoring in, hey, I'm employing them to be a backup caregiver and sending them out. But if you've been kind of just doing matchmaking and the family's more the one controlling that pay, that's what the family should pay attention to. So agencies often chat with us and say, like, hey, so and so, the Smith family is looking at joining our backup care program. Can you set up a call with them just so that they're aware of the tax thresholds and what to pay attention to as they start to pay this person? And we just have like a discussion with them, like a free consultation, and we just kind of talk to them about what to be aware of as they go along. Um, Newborn care specialist, this is hyperlinked here for when you need it for those of you that do matchmaking with newborn care. It's not always an employee, it's not always an independent contractor. They have a little more nuance and can go either way. And the why it matters here as we kind of move along is really it has to do with the tax implication, like who is paying for the taxes. Jobs that people take in, right? Like when you are someone, whether you're working at an office, working at a restaurant, working for yourself, you have taxes on your earnings. And so there are typically, like in a W-2 arrangement, you have employer taxes and then you have employee taxes. So some is taken out of that gross rate. Like if that person is earning $1,000 a week, they're paying into their income taxes, their Social Security, their Medicare, and maybe they're walking away with a little closer to 800 when all is said and done. But they're paying into their taxes. When it's a W-2 employee classification, whether you're the agency employing or you are the family employing, you have employer taxes. That's on the left-hand side here. It's another 7.65%. for Social Security and Medicare, because you kind of share that burden with the employee, and some unemployment taxes. The easy math in your head should be about 10%. So whether the family's the employer or you are the employer, and you think about this person's rate, you want to think about, ooh, there's going to be another 10% or so. It's not 1,000 out the door, it's 1,100. Now, there are obviously business methods for deducting expenses and doing other things, don't get me wrong. But when you think about the W-2 arrangement, think about like two sides of the tax equation, some that the caregiver pays, some that the person who is employing them pays. And when you have a 1099 arrangement, like a newborn care specialist or a specialized nurse who's doing senior care and who wants to be a 1099 person and dictate her rate and do all the things, they're actually taking on both sides of that obligation. So you might find, for example, that you have a newborn care specialist and maybe they're really savvy with like their placements and their tax arrangements, and they want to, work through your agency to be placed somewhere. They might say, well, I can do either or, I can do W-2 or 1099, but if I do W-2, my rate's 40 an hour. If I do 1099, it's 45 an hour. They'll often have a higher rate if they're going to run it under their NCS business or whatever they're structuring it out underneath, because they know they're taking on a higher tax burden. And so sometimes an agency will do the same thing. They'll say, I don't mind employing the caregivers and I'm going to take that tax burden off your plate, client, but I'm going to charge you more for it if you want to do it that way. Or you can be the employer on record and go have a conversation with Franny and she can help set you up. And so you're able to kind of say, I could help you with that. Now, I'll say a lot of agencies want to avoid that, mostly because of liability. And I am not an attorney, so I can't say a lot about liability, but I will tell you that, like, when you think about sending someone to someone else's home and you think about humans that are involved in the caregiving, obviously you're in a sensitive place. People protect their children, they protect their loved ones, their elderly parents. They think about, what if something goes wrong? Who am I going to blame for the issue? And that family will turn to the agency if the agency is employing them and responsible for them. So a lot of agencies will shy away from being the direct employer unless that just fits their clientele, and they have a lot of clientele near them that is like, yeah, I don't want to touch taxes. Can you just do it? I don't care if I pay you more. I'll pay you $10 more an hour. I don't care. I don't want to touch it. I just want you to manage it and you to be the employer. And so you have to kind of think about your area and what works for you. But what you don't want to get in the pickle of is you managing it, saying you're going to manage it all, paying it all, and then giving a 1099 to a caregiver that says, well, I think I need a W-2. Do you give it to me or does the family? Because if the family paid you as the agency, they're going to say, well, you get that from the agency, not from me. We actually get a lot of calls during tax season from both families and agencies who say, caregivers keep asking us who's supposed to give them a W-2, but I think they just get a 1099 from the family. What do I do? And so it's this confusion of who is the employer. It comes down to that, like, this caregiver wants to file their taxes and they don't know who to go to for the right form. So it needs to be clear from the moment you're placing someone who the employer is or who you'd like the employer to be, what the options are. And again, that can be fluid a little bit depending on what your business structure is like and what you prefer. But there are a lot of benefits for W-2 employment for the not just the employer if it's the family and protection, but for the caregiver. And this says, benefits of legal pay for nannies. This can be for any employee, for domestic workers. This was just sort of a pre-done, image that a colleague of mine had put together in the past. But the benefits of legal pay for nannies or for employees, I can't tell you enough how much easier it is as a nanny to have a W-2, even for a part-time job. I get it's not always the right classification in certain circumstances, but I will tell you that in most of it, it is. And the verifiable income piece is huge. It can be a difference in getting a car loan and getting, a certain level of house. If you're like, look, I can have this starter home, but look, even with my joint income with my spouse, I think I can afford this one, but I have 1099 work, I have independent contractor work, and I've always recorded it that way, and I don't have a W-2 for that work. And lenders don't like it. They see it as volatile because they see, oh, you're in business for yourself, but you don't have a website. You don't have proof of your books and records and what you've earned. You just have your annual return. It's risky to them. Whereas a W-2 shows less risk. They're able to verify through an offer letter and the W-2 and the 1040. They're like, oh, okay, this person has sustainable income in a different way. And so verifiable income for credit cards and loans are huge for domestic workers. That can be the difference between, getting the car that is the newer one, safer one with less issues than getting like a kind of worse backup car that's cheaper that they just have to go get because they don't have enough verifiable income. When you have unemployment, we've seen that in the pandemic, a lot of nannies filing for unemployment and realizing like they had a right to it, but also hadn't paid into it, and it was a big mess. And families trying to clean things up and try to make sure that they had documents. And people went without pay and unemployment benefits at a really hard time. And then Social Security and Medicare. I know that that's kind of a hot button topic, and everybody has the latest news opinion on it and what could happen with it. But the reality is it's there and it is paying out to people. And there are a lot of domestic workers that are closer to the Social Security and Medicare time of claiming their benefits. And it's there for you when you're paying into it. If you're not paying into it throughout the course of your career, it's not showing. If you're off book and you're just kind of not reporting your income as a nanny, even if you got paid and then you just never reported and you're flying under the radar, you don't have the same benefits. And you can even log into Social Security Administration and look at your earnings year over year over year because copies of W-2s are given to them. And you can see what your earnings are and go, oh, like how much could I really have? But I earned, what about that one job I had where I had 50,000? I didn't report it, but I had 50,000, those sort of things. So you want to make sure that like as you're working with these candidates that are going out to these homes, that you're poising yourself in a position to structure the model in a way that they have access to benefits as a nanny, as a professional, or as a caregiver. Um, Staffing agencies. And I see, was that a chat? I think there's one more in the chat here. Is there any questions? I just want to make sure as we're kind of diving into. Anybody else have questions right now before we dive into the next little bit of fun? This is kind of like the meat of it here, and then we'll do some questions, but okay. So basically, when you're thinking about your agency and how you want to structure things, there are different ways to do it. And we're not going to say one way is better than the other because I'm going to tell you what, I talk to so many different agencies and they do it many, many different ways. But when you think about 1099 versus W-2, you want to think about it in different contexts. So caregiver paid by agency, caregiver paid by family, and then blended models. Some agencies do both. They go, look, we have a placement feature, or we have tiers of service and a placement feature, but we also do backup care and corporate care and just different things that, meet your needs. What are your needs, client? We'll help you, and you just start to figure it out. But continue to pay attention to that 1099 versus W-2 and who is making the payment to the person. Okay. The whole idea here is to remember the classification of who's controlling the work. If paid directly by agency, who is responsible for the taxes? How would you classify the caregiver? W-2 versus 1099. Are there higher risks for certain classification? Now, this is a fun one because this one is local to me. I'm going to show a snippet on the next slide here, but I did put the hyperlink here so we could see from the Department of Labor website. You're welcome to click on it on the PDF. And the idea that agencies should provide a tax form if money is given by agency or caregiver. Well, I'll tell you what, a huge thing that's happening, not just here, this one in Pittsburgh that came about, but all around. And I live in Pittsburgh right now. In the caregiving space, misclassification is high. And that being said, sometimes it's not even like, hey, we gave them a bunch of 1099s. as an agency. Sometimes they did give W-2s in certain circumstances, but they didn't classify them as hourly employees. They gave them like flat straight rates and never paid overtime, and they got caught for it. And huge things can happen. Now, we see this more in larger staffing companies, in particular in the care space, like home health and senior care. And we see it there because the need is very high there. And it's usually an immediate need. Someone falls and goes to the hospital and comes home and they need care. And it's just patch, patch, patch. Yes, let's send this person out. Let's do this. And so a lot of senior caregiving agencies or home health agencies employ caregivers directly instead of the matchmaking model. But it's still a good lesson to kind of pay attention to that depending on your own model as an agency, whether you're in home health or you're in like nanny care placements, you want to pay attention to the fact that these people should be hourly and you want to pay attention to exactly how much work is being performed and record it properly if you're going to employ them, and you want to make sure you're being compliant. And now's the time to do it while these conversations are hot, right? Like I feel like they're going to fine tune how that I say they as in the IRS is going to fine tune in the Department of Labor how they look at things. And you want to be on kind of the leading edge of tidying up your processes because the sooner you do that, the sooner you're just off to the races and you can help others too as they have questions, right? But the whole idea is just to pay attention to who is making the payment and are they classifying them correctly? And, understanding that this particular example was a very large agency. So I get some agencies are pretty small and they're just working locally in their community, but it's still just kind of a little word of the wise just to pay attention to, okay? But that whole article is linked on that hyperlink on here. So you're welcome to look at it through the PDF and see. And then when you're talking about caregiver paid by the family, this is where a lot of our partners sit. They might have some backup care, but some of their backup care programs are still the family paying. So you might be a family that has backup care services through an agency and you have a subscription service, for example. And you're like, yep, I'm going to do a subscription service. I just need occasional date night care and I need a pool of babysitters to pick from, or I need a pool of candidates that I can say, hey, I need help this week or that week or dog sitting or whatever it might be. And you're kind of focused on the accessibility to your candidate pool. And perfectly fine to have subscription fees for that. You're providing a service, right? But what you want to pay attention to again is can you structure it in a way that the family is still responsible for paying the caregiver directly? And I'm aware, without knowing a lot of details about how Stripe works and Engine Hire, I'm aware that through Engine Hire platforms, you actually can do that pretty easily. You're able to designate certain things and have it that the money flow is coming from the family to the candidate. That's great. The next step for that is to say, hey, so glad you're using our backup care services. We're so happy to be a resource for you. And, we're going to make sure you're met. By the way, we partner with HomeWork Solutions. They're a complimentary partner. They will give you free consultations. This is for you to be aware of certain tax thresholds if you find you are reusing the same caregiver and would like them to be a preferred one. There's different ways you can phrase it that makes sense for your language, but the idea is you're just giving them that little heads up and you're saying, we, the agency, are not employers of the backup caregivers. We are here to help matchmake and find the right placement for your home. Here's HomeWork Solutions who can help you be aware of specific tax obligations that may or may not apply to you as you go along with in-home care. So you're literally just phrasing things in a way that you can still charge what you need to say, here's the candidate pool and here's the booking and here's what we need. But hey, heads up, you might have tax implications because in that way, one, you're informing them correctly. You're saying, hey, be aware of this. You might have an implication. And that implication might just be you need to give them a 1099 because you crossed 600 in wages to them, but they really were backup babysitting care and they were not a formal employee. And it's okay to notate it that way. However, once you're crossing 600, because you have to, at that point, give a form to them, that's a good time for a family to go, do I want to keep requesting, Jane, or should I request Shonda for the next one? Because maybe I don't want to have this extra obligation and I don't want to have to think about the taxes, but I still want to participate in the backup care platform. And so you're putting the agency, not your agency, the agency of decision, so the ownership of that decision in the hands of the family to say, hey, we're happy to give you anything you want. We'll send this person or that person or whatever you need. But then that family can go, oh no, I think I've already like paid so and so 500. Can we actually do you have a secondary candidate we can use so that we don't cross any tax thresholds? So it's little things like that. This backup care and tax form requirement article is amazing, and it stems directly from agencies, small agencies who are running into this issue. So it's a great one to bookmark and get familiar with and to share with families who are doing backup care as opposed to full-time or part-time nanny placement care. It just gives them a little bit of awareness and then a resource to understand some of these thresholds and what to be aware of. Because ultimately, the classification decision has to be on that family if this person is not an employee of your agency. Like if you do not employ these people and you were like, look, I just match make them, I do not employ them, I don't want to employ them, not how I want to run my agency right now, then what you're saying is, I need the family to take ownership of this. And if I need the family to take ownership of this and I don't want to scare them off, what I need to do is kind of gently push the awareness button and say, hey, time to be aware of some of the thresholds around here and how you want to classify this person. Because just to be clear, we are a matchmaking service and we will help find through our candidate pool placements. However, we do not employ these nannies directly. We help with the background check, we help with all the other things, but we do not employ them directly. They are paid by you. So this will also be on your PDF, of course. Um, and then just kind of understanding that, is there a world where you can do both? Yes. Can you transition? Yes. So whether you transition as an agency to doing it one way versus another because you find it's better for you, or can the family transition? Can they just do the backup care and go, we really love Shonda. We want her to come back. Can we please have her back? We'd love for her to be our routine date night person Fridays and Saturdays, or whatever it is. And Shonda's all about it and she wants to do it. Does your agency have a path for them to do a direct hire for part-time work? Can you charge them a fee to do it? Can you, move them over to a different division in your agency where you do charge a larger placement fee and say, well, you can, but she's part of our backup pool. So if I can't access her for other families to offer her services, like you have to actually just you do the placement version of our agency and pay the placement fee. So agencies try to find both. And then families, the biggest question that they then have as they go on is, well, I've already given her money. I've already paid her through Venmo or a Cash App or Stripe. I've given her money, but now I'm crossing thresholds. What do I do? And the reality is you just catch up the taxes super quick. It's not that much to do. They do not have to cover that person's income tax. They literally just go, hey, we're enrolling in services now. We need you to help us with the tax arrangement. Also, I want to note that we already have given her about $700, or we've given her about $3,000. We're just crossing it now. And we go, great, no worries. Let's go ahead and get you moving forward. Let's collect the FICA tax. It's not that much overall. And let's get you on the right path for the next step. It's the same thing that they do when they go back to last year. So 25% of the clients I work with in tax season, they're going back to the beginning of the prior year and saying, I need to get my nanny a W-2. What do I do? And we just back them up, get their taxes sorted out. It's not that bad. We move them forward correctly, and the nanny gets a W-2. So there is an answer. There's an answer to all of it. You've not gone too far to go, but you can't go back. You can go back. Biggest thing is that the candidates need to be aware that families don't have to cover income taxes for prior wages. So if the family's paying attention to it or the nanny's paying attention to it and they know they've earned 3,000 or been paid 3,000, that's the time to move because it's a low enough amount that really like it's not going to impact their individual income taxes too much as a nanny candidate or a caregiver. It's a small enough amount that like they should be pretty good. Then they can always the rest of the year do additional withholdings if they're worried about it. But really it's soon enough that it's not like a whole year of payments where they never planned for income taxes and all of a sudden they're going to get hit with a tax bill. And some families are super generous and they cover the income taxes anyway, which they're allowed to do. Because we're like, we love this nanny. We don't want this to be a mistake. Let's just do it, or it's sometimes even in the senior care space. So you want to kind of think about how there's a solution for it. It doesn't have to be the end of the world if it wasn't, off on the right foot from day one. And then common questions that are often asked to agency owners when taxes are brought up. What are the taxes? What is an orange is literally a templated response. You could keep it on a cheat sheet somewhere and you can say, or, drop it into an email response to them. Okay, this is what it is. And you could copy and paste it over or whatever you need to do. Okay. And then how much is it? That approximately 10% of gross pay? It can vary state by state, but you're about 10% of gross pay on average throughout the year. Okay. And so, can we use this article on our resource page, Angela? So you can. It's a hyperlinked PDF, so you're welcome to. But I actually have another one that I could send you to. I can send it to Danny, and he can send it out. And it's responsibilities as an employer. It's like an employer's guide. And so if I can grab that one too, I can give it to you. And it has more pretty pictures on it. It's more marketable in a way that's great for families. So the Danny, I'm pretty sure she's going to say yes. Yeah. So the whole PDF is there if you need it. But let me also get you, I can send it to Danny after our call today. This other one that is wonderful. It's also on we have like a nanny agency partner program. And so we have it listed there as well, but I can grab it, send it to you. And then that way you can have an employer guide right on your website. And you're welcome to put my contact info. We have a lot of agency partners that put my name and booking link and everything right on their website. And so they're able to say, like, here's Franny, she's our go-to person for families. Ask her, as a courtesy of working with our agency, it's free, just go talk to her. Now, payroll does cost something if they need to do it, but that's kind of on a sliding scale of how much they actually need. Like some people just need like summer help. And so it's very limited cost for that. Whereas like some people are like, oh, I have 2 employees and I need round the year care. And so we just kind of assess that based on the consultation, but the consultations are free. And I always say better for us to have that conversation, right? Like better for us to take 15, 20, 30 minutes with them. And then they just know. And they never have to think that agency owner didn't tell me about this. They just know. They're never mad at you. They're never writing a bad review saying, oh, they never told me about this. And then my nanny asked for a W-2 and we had to eat all this money in taxes. Oh, it was so awful. It's it's always better to just head it off at the pass. And if a family ignores it and they do something else and it comes back to bite them, you've said all you can say. You've done all the right things, right? And that's what's important. It's protecting your agency the best way possible. As far as tax breaks, there's some nuance to that. So some people have quick access to certain tax breaks. Some people have a little bit of a break through their current work, actually, and not everybody does. And then other people like to fold them in with benefits like health insurance or other things. So that one I do recommend giving a general answer because it can vary household to household. You just say, hey, let me send you some articles, or maybe you say, hey, here's Franny, she'll send you some articles, and you're able to just kind of kick the education to someone else so that you don't have to waste your time on it. If it's like, hey, that's not my speed, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to find them a candidate. That's what I want to talk about. Okay. Um, and then similarly, as we kind of get to the end here, um, this can vary by family. I really encourage, I get there are a lot of different comparative costs online, but I talk to people all the time and they say, like, how are you different at HomeWork Solutions from, the GTM and the Poppins and the HomePay and all these other wonderful companies? And I really appreciate knowing them and working with them and seeing them at conferences and everything, all wonderful companies, but we all do offer things slightly differently. And we have different capacities behind the scenes. So it's important to know as an agency owner, partner with anybody you want to partner with, because a lot of them have great programs. And so you're welcome to partner and be the resource sharer. You're the one saying, here, family, here are all the wonderful options. It's my job then when I have a consultation with them to say, here's how we're different. Here's how we handle tax management. Here's, how we handle if someone's filing for paid family leave. Here is how we handle everything from an HWS side and see what they think. but you're welcome to give them general budgeting. This is the general budgeting I would give them no matter what platform they use, whether it's us or a different one. And the reason for that is the ones that are priced less often have line items, or they have maybe a limited capacity to do tax resolution notice, and that person might have to go to their accountant to do it and get a cost that way. So I always say, like, when you're educating a family, think gross pay plus 10%. If they need or want to have workers' comp, it depends on their state if it's required. Think 500 to 1,000 a year. It might be less. And then think payroll and tax compliance. Think 1,200 a year. There's a good chance it's less than that or it's prorated, right? But even if it's in a platform that is a lower cost platform, they still might be told to go do things independently that cost money. I've worked with people that have a lower cost platform, but then the family said, well, I still had to go set up tax accounts myself, or I had to ask my accountant to do it and they charged me another $200 to do it. So we do all of this setup for families. So our costs are comprehensive and included, but in general, I just say you're better off telling them 1,200, and then if they spend 1,000 or less, like good for them. But give them the higher number so that they're not worried about it. And then this is our actual blog article that stemmed from conversations with agencies this tax season, or I think it might have been right before this tax season. It was towards the end of the year, about who the employer is. And so what we just talked about kind of summarizes all of it, but this one is here too for you to bookmark and hold on to so that you're able to, plan appropriately. For those that I see your question here, because that's what we're going to next is questions. For those who haven't been classifying correctly, how long are they responsible? There is a statute of limitations on some things, unless you're continuing to like in an ongoing fashion, be, and I know we're all doing this in our best faith. So I don't want to say predatory because that sounds rude and mean, but like what feels like or what the IRS would deem is like, oh, these are predatory practices. We all know that the whole reason you're in this is to provide care and to be a good matchmaker, and no one's trying to misstep. And believe it or not, I think the IRS is a little forgiving. They might not be for like the larger senior care agencies that staff like that Pennsylvania or that Pittsburgh example I gave, because they have a wider impact in general. Don't get me wrong, but and probably a list of complaints of misclassification. But if you're at this and you're attending this, you're already being aware, right? So you're stepping in here to know, like, okay, I'm trying to improve my agency and do this correctly. And an IRS audit, usually I kind of say it's not someone knocking on your door, right? It's a baby audit. It's like, here's a notice. You've missed something. Come provide this information or come give this tax document. Can you amend your things? Okay, great. So you have time to tidy things up. And often, like even in the tax world for families, sometimes they can have things waived. Like if they get a penalty for not having workers' comp because they're just now getting on the books after a year and the state gets mad, they can call the state or they have us call for different things. And we just request a waiver. We're like, hey, look, this is a household employer. They're trying their best. They're trying to follow the rules. Can we please just cut them a little bit of slack here? And often it works, because the whole idea is that they're also trying to do their best too to just make sure workers are protected and that the taxes are paid, right? And so it's really, it doesn't have to be an end all situation where, oh no, now we're under the microscope. Unless, someone's throwing a complaint against you, you're probably not under the microscope right now, right? But it doesn't mean you can't improve things before someone would put you under the microscope. You might as well just start working on it now. And other agencies have found savvy ways to do it, to just kind of politely say, hey, family, this is up to you. Here's our contact. Have fun, and they're still then able to charge for backup, monthly fees and other things, right? Um, so this is a good article to bookmark to read through. I know this is a lot of heavy information. It's a meaty topic, right? So be patient with yourself. Don't hesitate to ask questions and come back to me. We do have, partner programs. So I recommend, this is my contact info. If you send me an email, I was telling Danny, I realized my email's not on this page for some reason, but it's just my first name. So Franny at homeworksolutions.com. If you scan the QR code, it does download that to your phone, so you'll be able to like have my email in there and my work number in there. But you can just email me at Franny at homeworksolutions.com and we can set up a call. We can talk about the partner program and how it runs and like help you be successful in kicking families our direction so that you're being the helpful resource person. And yet, you don't have to stress about doing it wrong from day one. You're just kind of saying, okay, look, we have assistance in our back pocket. Okay. Does anybody have other questions though? I know we're like right about our line here, I think, for time. Is anybody feeling completely overwhelmed and going, oh my goodness, what do I do?
I am.
You are. Okay. See, if you do, like, don't be
And I'm
afraid to set a call with me. Yeah.
like, yes, because I have been structure my agency in the way that the family pay me and I pay, but still I call the caregiver a 1099.
And you
They
give them a
are
1099?
they are independent contractor themselves.
Do you give them the 1099 yourself or like through an app or
No, I do not. I do
okay.
not. They will be the contract that I'm forming. It says that they are independent contractor and they are responsible for the taxes on whatever that they receive. That we are not employer and they are exactly on their own. So
That's
I'm
what I would
not
be careful of. Yeah. I'd be very careful of that because even as an agency, that can be considered a misclassification. And yet,
okay.
it doesn't mean you can't pivot, right? Like if you're developing the contract, it's your
Yeah.
company. You want to change it, you change it, right?
Yeah.
And if you change the flow of the money so that the money is coming from the family and not you,
Yeah.
then you lessen your co-employment risk, especially if you're not going to manage their work.
Yeah.
Um, but if you are managing the work and you need to do a W-2 arrangement, some people just they up their prices to the families. They say, I got to take on this tax burden and figure out employing them. That's a lot. That's administrative work, right?
Yeah.
And it's taxes. It's more money out of your pocket. And it's
Hmm.
more risk and liability and all the things. And so families who don't want to touch the taxes often don't care if they pay more to have someone else touch the taxes. But that being said, if you're like, well, that's not the market I'm in right now. I don't think they would pay more. Then you want to maybe flip the model to be more, okay, well, I can help from my candidate pool place them,
Hmm.
but the family should be aware that they have to be in charge of classifying this person. So
Okay.
the work agreement has to be between the family and the care.
And the caregiver.
Right. You can still prep it and like kind of help in a little bit. I think the common cautionary tale is to not prep it too much. Like there are a lot of templates out there.
Hmm.
Ultimately, we even have a template we can share that you're welcome to share with families.
Okay.
That's pretty dry, but the reason for that is to limit your co-employment risk, is so
Yeah.
that the family is filling it out and you're just the helpful person finding the candidates and placing them where they need to be and doing all that.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
and the best way for me to do it, and that's how I have been thinking, is probably get the percentage that an agency will charge, and then have them directly.
Mhm.
Even I negotiate the rate, so the family will be paying the caregiver directly.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. A lot of agencies do it. A lot of our partners do it that way. Even ones that use Engine Hire, they basically have it structured that they're saying, thanks for joining our backup care program. Also, as part of that, you have access to Franny and you want to be aware of tax rules when you're paying someone. And
Yeah.
they're so helpful, but the reality is they're still paying you for a service. You're finding them, you're vetting them, you're interviewing these employees.
Hmm.
You're trying to make sure that you're providing the best caregivers you can for the role.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm
Well,
so glad that you guys came. I really do welcome consultation. So if you are interested in just chatting about how to set up as a partner, feel free to reach out and schedule a call with me. I'm going to a nanny training day this weekend, so I don't have availability the rest of this week, but next week or the week after would be fine.
let me copy. This is you, right? This is your information.
That's mine. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
So it should
perfect.
save if you scan it with your phone, it'll save to your phone, but then it's listed there and then my email's
Oh,
just free.
perfect. I do have it. I scan it, so it's right there.
Perfect.
I can save that.
Perfect. Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you, Danny, too, for this Space.
I took so many notes. Thank you so much for like sharing all of this. And I love the questions. They were amazing. I have a feeling like myself, you'll probably get people not wanting to out themselves as not knowing so much.
It-
And like you're gonna
let's
get,
be
I
real.
feel
I
like
had
you're
to go
gonna get
back to
some.
school to know. Like, I don't, it's okay to not know, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't just ask it anyway, or just like be like, tell me if I'm hypothetically doing it this way, what would you say? Like, just, I want to thank you all too. This has been great. And please do, share my contact info or, as people, Danny, if you hear of people watching it and asking questions, they can always reach out to me. Like, I know I say that, but I think some people are like, can I really? Yeah, you can reach out to me. Just book a call and we'll chat. But thank you all for your time. When am I going to be available to speak? Oh, yeah, if you're still in the chat here, just anytime next week or the week after, if you want, if you send me an email, I'll kick you my booking link. And so you'll have the booking link and you can pick a time, okay? So just send me a quick email, say hi, and I'll hit reply and throw my contact info there with my booking link for you.